Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, and I bring you compilations from seasons 6, 7, and 8 in this episodes of Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls number 45, Walking on the Moon, leveraging AI models to transform amorphous ethical ideals into solid earthly business practices. This podcast calls upon four podcasts from season 8. The first one starting in November 26, 2024, was my conversation with Jakub Ondrasek. Jakub is the CEO at Clore.AI, and we talked about how to harness the power of high-end GPUs for scalable and efficient AI model training. The second podcast, all these are from season 8, and all of these can be found on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google, YouTube, anywhere you listen to your podcast, you can check these out in their entirety. I bring you 4 to 5 minute clips from each episode. The second person I spoke with was Ben James. We spoke in early March 2025. He is the founder of 404-Gen. We talked about how to democratize 3D content creation with advancements in AI architecture. That was an amazing conversation. The next conversation I had was with Yaroslav Writtle, and he is the core contributor at Yelay. We talked at the end of March 2025, March 29, 2025. We talked about unifying access to top DeFi protocols that secures capital deployment into decentralized AI. Last but not least, the fourth person was in May 15, 2025. The founder and chief scientist at Truebit, Jason Teutsch. We talked about examining the importance of transparency and verification in AI decision-making processes. This is a very, very popular episode, one of my top 10 episodes. Hundreds of listeners. Check it out. Very technical for those who are technical. Also very humorous for people who like humor. Also very informative for people who like information. This is a great conversation, a great podcast. And yeah, you'll enjoy it. So this was the 45th episode of the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls, entitled Walking on the Moon, leveraging AI models to transform amorphous ethical ideals into solid earthly business practices. Enjoy. I'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in.
How do we create a more understanding, field for VCs, or how do we educate them on what they should look at? Or is someone else better equipped to be able to do that?
That's like kind of problematic thing, of course. Like VCs, if their executives don't understand what they're investing into, they probably shouldn't do it, right? But how we educate them, it's like somewhat okay. AI still we can the risk is lowering in the industry. By my standpoints, I believe if for VCs it's probably the best to try if some of the larger companies open up fundraisers. Right now it's better to bet on the larger companies than like some smaller startups. If some smaller startup claims they are training their own foundation model from zero, I would personally not invest in them, because it is just losing its sense. Basically, the already open source foundation models are hitting really great like outcomes, and if it's just the competition in foundation models, in pure foundation models, is really high, and if you want to achieve something, it's just better if you say, I'll use this foundation model, we'll train it on this data that we have some advantage as a company, we can do it. I would mostly avoid people claiming they will train foundation model. I would not avoid them if they have some revolutionary technology, but like otherwise I would avoid this part of companies.
And that makes me think about what the best model is. I mean, some will say the best model is federated learning with a much smaller data set.
Yeah.
You know, what are your thoughts on what's more optimal and what's more ideal, a federated machine learning with a small data set or this massive encompassing sentiment style?
Well, we know like basically like I think we've seen it on Mixtral model it basic, and I would believe like because OpenAI and like Anthropic is basically closed, so we don't exactly know what they are doing, but the lead in like generating the best outputs for users is some mixture of like smaller expert models in like some fields. We've seen in Mixtral, it makes great sense to have like smaller expert models and one router between these models and RAG databases, which basically is it has nothing like to do with Clore, but I personally run experiment for one company where we trained some model that was it was like some competition basically, and we were needed like get as close as possible to Wikipedia answers at some point, so we just basically put search in Wikipedia the fastest. And we achieved the lowest loss basically by having a second RAG database, which was queried by the model and itself it pulled the data from it. So I think it's some mixture of expert models and models being able to navigate databases and like pull the data on itself too. Because like training is lossy, we know it, and when you're fitting like lot of petabytes of data into some model, yes, it's the best to fit as much data in a model as possible without overtraining it. But at some point, the models that are able to navigate some databases and effectively pull out contexts from it, it makes the most sense for now.
I'm gonna find out, back in 2022, was it 2022? I had a lot of interviews about the metaverse and NFTs and the metaverse, and a lot of them built on Polygon and Ethereum, and you're building differently. How's the AI space, the metaverse space? How's it evolved? People think the metaverse is dead, but it doesn't sound like it. So how's it evolved, and how's what like you're doing the next generation of that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, in this space, so many words gain associations or stigmas. And I think metaverse is one of those ones that, it had such high promise and then had, some manifestations that didn't live up to that promise, that there is some view that the metaverse is dead. But I think how we define the metaverse also makes a big difference here, because what we haven't seen die off are huge immersive experiences through games, for example. We haven't seen die off new technology that drives VR or especially AR and XR innovation forward, right? And I think these are some of the foundational underpinnings of what I would consider to be the metaverse. I think there are some learnings, though, which would be that the virtual worlds themselves need to have more reason for people to spend time there, to engage with that. Attention is such a scarce resource in our society today, and I think some of the early iterations of the metaverse didn't capture that in the same way that they had hoped to. And my suggestion is that to some extent there is missing this idea that you as a user are actively shaping this virtual world around you, or this hybrid virtual world if it's an XR experience. So this generally fits the terminology of user-generated content, right, within industry, or UGC. So there are games where you as a user can generate your own weapons or worlds, to your liking. And what we see in those worlds is a much higher level of engagement and attention, because you have some ownership over that, whether it's on-chain, technical ownership, or even just emotional ownership over the worlds and the assets that you create. And I think then, to me, this is where AI comes in, because this is where all of a sudden, if you have a lot of people participating in whatever the next wave or generation of the metaverse looks like, you know that you want those people to be actively building and shaping that metaverse. And to have a critical mass of people actively building and shaping that metaverse, they need to have the tools that allow them to do that. And in our case, that's Gen AI. That's basically where, those lower barriers to entry here make a huge difference.
Great. Awesome. So there are macro trends then in AI, right? So what are those macro trends, the big macro trends in AI, including Gen AI, right? And what are the greatest challenges to AI, I guess, adoption, globally with, at the intersection of blockchain and AI? What's the challenges with the macros?
So I think a couple of macro trends that I often think about is, one, the speed at which open source AI models are able to catch up and even overpass closed source models. I think this is very important, because it creates more of a Cambrian explosion, if you will, of innovation that can take place on top of this, because you give people all of the access and the tools and the knowledge to do so. So that's one point. The other sort of thing that falls from that is, well, if you have open source models, this is ideal for decentralization. Since you have all of that shared knowledge, right? You can do things like decentralize the inference or the building of these foundational models or the applications that come from it. And so this means that more people can participate in the ecosystem. And this is kind of, then the third side of this is, okay, well, can we track that ownership and authenticity through decentralization, which is where blockchain would come in? And so to me, these are sort of three really nice trends that have come together. So the speed and trajectory of open source models, the decentralization that enables, and then the blockchain element of it, which allows you to track ownership and authenticity and other kind of, typical Web3 principles that would flow through there. So to me, these are three trends that come together very nicely for AI at the moment.
And there's been a thing in crypto, and it's, silos, right? All these different protocols act in silos, like they're the best one, and there's no other one, and we're the one chain to rule them all. You're unifying, I think you're unifying, DeFi protocols. How does that unification help grow the Web3 global ecosystem, and how do you get them unified?
You're 100% spot on. I mean, there is so much fragmentation right now. I mean, you remember in the early days, you had, are you a Bitcoiner? Are you an ETH maxi? Are you a Solana guy? And then if you look at 2025, I mean, how many chains are there now? I don't think I even kept track of all the chains that are out there. And so there is a big commoditization of what is a blockchain, but the reality is, and you have all this liquidity spread across as well, and all these chains are trying to steal Ethereum's liquidity, because that's where most liquidity is for DeFi, and bring it to their chains. And that's why you have all these crazy airdrops and incentive programs and all these initiatives, should we say. But as a retail user, do you really care which chain you're operating on, or where you're generating yield, or how you're using? Because really, what do you care about? You care about it's fast, it doesn't cost too much, and you're getting the best user experience. Now, you could say, hey, well, I'll go to Solana, but then Solana's very centralized, and it also doesn't have the liquidity. You'll say, hey, well, I can go to Sui, but Sui is challenging to bridge to your assets. So as exactly you say, what the objective that we have is, how do you simplify DeFi for users, whether you're retail, builders, or institutional, and help you build with that yield and build more interesting products on top of it? And that's really kind of what it comes down to. So reduce the risk, reduce fragmentation, and just put the ugly motor under the bonnet, and just give people a nice, comfy car to sit in to get from A to B.
I'm still waiting for that comfy car to show up. Right?
Work in progress.
When do you think we're going to get there?
We are. I think the great thing that really, I'm putting my VC hat on for a second. The thing that really motivates me, inspires me, is that I think a lot of the thinking now is changing. So before we're kind of like engineering first, i.e., hey, I built this cool thing, now let's go sell it. And then why isn't anyone using it? Whereas now I think there's much more of a product-based thinking, where we're looking at, okay, what is the user problem? Let's build a product for that user, and then see, are we getting the traction? And if we're getting traction, then great, let's double down. If we've got something wrong, let's pivot and do something else. And the classic kind of lean startup thinking of, are we building stuff that people actually want to use, is becoming more and more prominent. And these are the kinds of founders, teams, and projects what we want to be backing. And by the way, this is not exclusive to early stage projects. I think you'll see that a lot of the big L1s with multi-billion dollar market caps are going through a bit of an identity crisis themselves, right? Where they're looking at, I know, how do we compete when there are 30 other chains out there trying to do the same thing as us and trying to sell block space to, both institutionals and early stage builders. So I think this kind of whole product market fit angle is becoming more and more relevant, and people are asking more, how do we get people to use our stuff, not just how do we build cool stuff?
That makes a lot of sense, because I've seen on social media recently people saying Ethereum is dead, and I'm like, it's not dead. Like, we're getting competitors, and the team's getting complacent. So I'm like, I see it as complaints on social media. I don't see it in reality. How do you know?
I think like the Ethereum, there's no arguing that the Ethereum foundation has really been a little bit lackluster in shipping and delivering. And I think the whole ethos that they've had has been much more around the decentralization and this kind of slightly more utopian view of what it can be. Now, that as a former Ethereum maxi, I would always aspire to the fact that I love this permissionless kind of state, and the fact that there's no risk of centralization, your funds being frozen. The problem is it's growing a startup through quorum and consensus of lots of people is very, very slow.
Yeah, so you make a good point there about certainty, right? So how could verification technology address, I guess certainty goes along with accountability, and apparently there's an accountability crisis here that exists in AI with regard to certainty. So how could verification technology potentially address that certainty issue?
So I think there are, I've mentioned a few tools already on this call, so I'll just recount them and we can dive in deeper or maybe add to the list. But this self-proving models is an interesting one. When we're doing Truebit is another. I mean, the one place I'd add on Truebit Verify in terms of sort of bringing data provenance, proving that you're interacting with the model that you think you are, proving that it's doing the inference in the way you expect it to, proving that it's trained on the way any kind of semantic proofs that you can prove about the model too. That's another form. And then on top of that, anytime you're going to be processing data, there are all kinds of little, what do you call them? Data cleaning, like little processes that you have to do to interpret the data. I mean, this is a place where, Truebit Verify is really immediately useful, because, you can write a few lines of JavaScript code and have a proof written up, within seconds. So that's, I mean, from the time you write have the code written, well, hey, have an AI write look at the pipeline we're looking at, like with vibe coding catching on. You're going to have an AI that comes in, writes a code based off of talking to you for 3 seconds. And then off of that, you would be able to generate some sort of proof that this scripting process of processing of the data is done correctly. I mean, there's just like, you need it. What I've noticed, having sat in this verification spot for so many years, is that when someone says, I want verification, they aren't saying, well, I just need this little, I need a ZK proof for this little thing. I mean, occasionally you are, if you're living in the blockchain space and everything is, basically it's the one place where everything is certain and data doesn't disappear, but the real world isn't like that. So if you're sitting in this place where data is basically, once someone says I want verification, they want it end to end, because your verification is only as good as the weakest link in that whole pipeline, basically. And so yeah, basically that's what I've observed, and so then you question, where do the inputs come from, and every step along the way, who's been involved in the processing. And more we're seeing third parties being involved with processing the data, right? When you have one central party that's doing everything, like, I don't know, let's give Google as the example. If Google is doing everything itself, then you can sort of rely on Google. But as we get more into turn to the decentralized world, as AI is sort of forcing us in that direction, it creates more and more uncertainty that has to be offset. I really see Truebit Verify as a counterweight to this AI movement, and you can't really have one without the other.
That makes sense. So there's a couple of areas to go down here. One is the data, right? So I want to find out, with Truebit Verify, and looking specifically at blockchains first, right? And the area of data, you mentioned ZK proofs. Another area that data is important is decentralized Oracle networks and oracles. Are we going to need to have those anymore, ZK proofs and oracles and all this, or can we just rely on the AI agents, AI models, Truebit Verify, to bypass this the need for those, for proofs and for Oracle?
I think you need all three. You're going to have to combine them together. I mean, really, the power in this is to create the whole package, right? It's not just an Oracle. It's not just compute. It's how do you, I mean, and that's what we've sort of been focused on with Truebit Verify. Normally what one does is that I need to pull in the data, then I need to process the data, and then I need to send it somewhere else. That's a super common pattern. And so, just getting one piece of the puzzle is not enough. And often the data you're pulling might be in an AI model itself, which is, we have a study that we just put out on Deep3, which you can find on the website, which sort of addresses this problem specifically in the AI space, which is to say, you can prove that, okay, I'm going to let the AI do certain, and using different kinds of models that are out there, and then being able to prove that those models are functioning in the way that they claim to be, or that I expect them to be. And sometimes it's not a matter of deceit, it's just misunderstanding. If you one person might assume that the code is doing one thing, and the other one assumes the person who created it assumes something else, and you just end up with a mismatch where